Bombs have long ceased falling, but in the gigantic cleanup program with which Germany is saddled, buildings must still be blasted.
Germany, 1945. Defeated, occupied, divided.
Germany, a nation of banner worshippers, has forfeited the right to a flag of her own. Today, the only flags that fly in Germany are those of her conquerors.
From the ashes of Nazism, two opposing worlds emerged. On one side, the West, which presented itself as the champion of freedom with fully stocked supermarkets and the roar of Volkswagen cars. On the other side, the East and its socialist promises, but also barbed wire and fear.
Then here, on the free side of the border, you would contrast the buoyant hope and spirit with the somber suspicion pervading the East Berlin Soviet sector just across the border.
A division that culminated in the construction of a wall, fracturing not just a city, but millions of lives. This is the story of what people endured and what they risked to escape. In July 1945, the Allied powers met at the Potsdam Conference. There, the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union divided German territory into 4 occupation zones, each under the control of one power. Berlin, the capital, was also divided, even though it lay entirely within the Soviet sector. The initial goal was clear: denazification, demilitarization, and democratization. But under that shared slogan, 2 incompatible visions of the world were already taking shape. Between 1945 and 1949, that political crack widened into an abyss. In the West, under US and British supervision, the foundations of a market economy were laid, along with civil liberties and political pluralism. In the East, the Soviet model advanced steadily: state control, a single party, repression, and surveillance. The division, which at first was supposed to be temporary, slowly became permanent. In 1949, 2 Germanys were born: the Federal Republic of Germany, or FRG in the West, and the German Democratic Republic, or GDR, in the East. It was the beginning of a story of shattered mirrors. 2 opposing systems, 2 different ways of living, 2 different ways of remembering. The wound of the war left not only ruins, it also left borders, and Germany, which had once dreamed of ruling Europe, became the symbolic battlefield of the Cold War. 2 worlds, 2 realities.
The Americans erected no victory monuments, but typical of our occupation is Truman Hall, which we built in Berlin. From the United States Office of Military Government, headquartered in buildings once occupied by Goering's Air Force, we administer our German zone. Specially uniformed Germans, those few who can be trusted with guns, help us guard our installations.
In the West, history seemed to move at highway speed. After the trauma of the war, West Germany bet on a new model: a parliamentary democracy with a market economy and guaranteed freedoms. It was the beginning of the Wirtschaftswunder, the so-called German economic miracle. With help from the Marshall Plan, industry rose again from the ruins. In the 1950s and 1960s, Factories ran at full capacity, producing steel, household appliances, and Volkswagen cars. The FRG was not just rebuilding itself, it was reinventing itself as a modern, capitalist, liberal power.
After years of Nazi poison in the schoolrooms, the children now get revised textbooks and are taught by anti-Nazi teachers. The future of the world may well depend on how these children grow up. Their minds are open and eager, ready to take on the stamp we give them.
Everyday life reflected that transformation. Wages were competitive, the middle class was growing, and television broadcast a Western lifestyle that dazzled its neighbors in the East. There was freedom of the press, political pluralism, and the right to emigrate.
And we are trying to teach Germans democracy. In this former Nazi publishing plant, our army issues a newspaper for the Germans. As editor-in-chief, an American major sets the pattern for honest journalism in our zone. After 13 years of lies and distortions, Germans can now read the truth, and many of them are responding.
But was West Germany also a kind of collective amnesia? While people talked about democracy, many former Nazis kept their positions in the administration, the judiciary, or the police. Democratic education became a key tool to shape a new generation, but not all crimes of the past were brought to justice. On the other side of the wall that did not yet exist, the German Democratic Republic was building its own narrative. Under Soviet tutelage, the new state promised equality, security, and work for everyone. Jobs and housing were guaranteed, and cultural and scientific policies were promoted in the name of socialism. But the utopia had cracks. The planned economy guaranteed the basics, but not what people desired. Long lines, shortages, and a lack of Western products were part of everyday life. Even so, for many people, especially in rural areas, the regime offered order and stability.
East Berlin, where a look is always one of suspicion, where there are constant barriers to free movement, where everyday life is under the surveillance of the police state. If you were to enter East Berlin, you would first of all see how the children live out their days.
However, the true backbone of control in the GDR was the Stasi, the secret police. Its surveillance apparatus was one of the most sophisticated in the world. More than 90,000 direct employees and 170,000 informants recorded phone calls, opened letters, installed microphones, and spied on neighbors, co-workers, and even family members. Criticizing the regime could cost a person their career, their freedom, or internal exile. There was no real need for a trial. A simple suspicion was enough to fall into the state's net. In some cases, people were arrested for comments made in a low voice or for reading banned literature.
Unable to endure a puppet regime backed by Soviet arms, they have been voting with their feet, escaping from East Germany at the rate of 4,000 a week since the Soviet occupation began in 1946.
And so two Germanys coexisted. One lived with consumer goods and elections, the other with basic security and control. One spoke of freedom, the other of equality. Both, however, were daughters of the same defeated country. And that balance was fragile. Slowly but surely, after almost 2 decades, it broke. The wall is a symbol. At dawn on August 13, 1961, Berlin changed forever. Soviet trucks, armed soldiers and rolls of barbed wire sealed off the border. In just a few hours, the line that separated the occupation zones turned into a concrete wall. It was now guarded by watchtowers, trenches, and snipers. The Berlin Wall was born as a desperate response by the Eastern regime. So, between 1949 and 1961, more than 2.7 million people had fled from east to west, many of them through Berlin. It was a hemorrhage of talent, manpower, and legitimacy that threatened to bring down the socialist system. The shock was brutal. Families were separated overnight, workers could no longer return to their homes, and lives and stories were frozen in concrete.
We have lived in the shadow of the wall for more than a year. It cuts through the heart of Berlin. We have learned to live with it.
But the wall did not stop the desire for freedom. Over nearly 3 decades, more than 5,000 people tried to cross it. Some succeeded using extraordinary methods: homemade hot air balloons, tunnels dug under the border, or modified cars. One of the most famous feats was Tunnel 57, built in 1964. 140 meters long and 12 meters deep, it was used to free 57 people in a single night. Not everyone was so fortunate. More than 100 people died trying to escape. Some were shot by snipers in full view of the world. Others were caught and jailed for trying to cross legally with forged documents.
On a Friday afternoon, they shot an 18-year-old boy as he was trying to scale the wall into West Berlin. They let him bleed to death on their side of the wall. Then they took his lifeless body and took him away. His name was Peter Fechter. He was an apprentice bricklayer.
And yet life went on, and tragedy unfolded on both sides of the wall. In West Germany, the 1960s and 1970s were marked by an economic boom, but also by a social awakening. The student movement criticized the unresolved Nazi past, US foreign policy, and middle-class conformism. Freedom made it possible to dissent, and also to make people uncomfortable. In Soviet-aligned Germany, everyday life was shaped by scarcity. A parallel black market emerged, and culture functioned under censorship. People listened to Western rock music in secret. Films had to pass through approval committees. Even so, some people found ways to resist. From hidden satire in theater to symbolic art on street murals. The wall was not just a physical barrier. It was a visible metaphor for the fracture running across Europe. And even as the concrete remained standing, the crack in German identity never stopped widening. The fall.
Parados sobre el muro, en la puerta de Brandenburgo, miles de alemanes del este acaban de cruzar la frontera hacia Berlín Occidental. Este muro, símbolo de la Guerra Fría, que los ha encerrado por 28 años, 2 meses y 27 días, había caído.
No puedo creerlo, es maravilloso, es fantástico.
On the night of November 9th, 1989, history shattered like concrete under a hammer. The borders between East and West Berlin opened unexpectedly. The crowd, incredulous, ran toward the border crossings. Some people cried, others climbed the wall. Many simply watched, not fully understanding that they were witnessing the end of an era. With hammers, pickaxes, and bare hands, people struck the wall until it began to come down. Each piece that broke off was more than concrete. It was a symbolic barrier that had separated families, ideas, and languages. The cameras captured hugs, applause, tears. Germany was once again a single country. But was reunification a happy ending? Not entirely. Decades later, the inequalities between East and West persist. Wage gaps, cultural resentments, fractured identities. The scar of the wall no longer divides physically, but its shadow still runs through people's memories. History does not end. It only changes shape. That's it for today's video from Military History. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you never miss any of our episodes. We'll say goodbye for now and see you in the next one.